Hi, everybody. Welcome to Celebrating Aviation with Mike Mashat. We're going to have some fun today. Today's episode is going to talk about helicopter models. But before we get into that, let me give you a little background. Here, speaking of helicopter models, here's little Timmy holding a Swadar 1/32nd scale plastic kit. It actually came as either a kit or fully assembled on skids or pontoons. And wait, look in the cockpit. That's Chuck Martin of Whirlybirds. Well, if you remember that fantastic show from 1957, Whirlybirds was an adventure about Chuck and PT, the two helicopter pilots flying a Bell 47, a 47G and a 47J Ranger. Fantastic. I know from personal experience, this show inspired the careers of many professional helicopter pilots that I know and have flown with today. Well, when it came time for me to make my first flight at age 10, I had to pick the Whirlybird at an air show. And lo and behold, it was the 15 minutes that changed my life. Gosh, it was so loud, the doors were off, and it just shook itself to pieces. I loved every second of it. In fact, I was so inspired, I took lessons and built my own helicopter. And on my first solo, seen here at age 9, I landed right in the middle of the backyard. And what a great day when I got my private certificate and was able to take passengers for the very first time. But in all seriousness, the Bell 47 was just a landmark design. It's neat to see so many of them restored and flying to this day. This particular model has a very amazing history to it. This was discovered at the original Douglas Library and Archive in Santa Monica, California. And it is a helicopter that was used by the Douglas Aircraft Company, but it was built, the model was built in the Bell Model Shop in Buffalo, New York. And then it was purchased by Douglas and hand painted, and the decals were then put on in Long Beach, California. But November 35 Delta was the Bell 47 that Douglas purchased and used in the early to mid 50s for aerial photography. Look at the detail on this thing. I mean, for the era, it's an amazing amount of technology and detail and precision. It's a brass tube tail boom, almost in perfect scale. This is, as I said, a 1/32nd scale kit. It's about 12 inches long from the tip of the bubble to the tail mast. And the blades are wood, just like on the real helicopter. Here we see a nice close-up view showing the exquisite workmanship, the engine. That's a rubber tire on the skid. Just a super model. Here's a close-up of the Douglas logo on the gas tank. So why would they use a helicopter? Well, to take pictures like this. This is a stunning late afternoon shot of the prototype DC-8 Ship 1 landing on runway 30 at Long Beach. And if you look just above the cockpit and slightly to the left, there's a shadow up there. And that is the shadow of the helicopter carrying the photographer who took this photo. You can see it's equipped with floats because they did take a lot of shots out over the water. And then this helicopter was replaced by the J Ranger in the late 1950s. I had to put this photo in here because it's just so darn cool. For those of you who are old enough to remember Arthur Godfrey, here he is flying a Navy version of the Bell 47D, the HTL-5. But Godfrey was a broadcaster, journalist, TV, radio personality, and just a really enthusiastic and passionate aviator, and he brought much of aviation to the American public in the 1950s. Great guy. Well, this is the helicopter that I flew in at age 10, as I mentioned, in my first flight at Zons, and it's shown at Zons Airport, which ironically was a mile south of Republic, and we go from the piston era to the jet age with the Suit Aviation SE 3130 Alouette 2. The Alouette was the first production turbine-powered helicopter in the world in 1958, and Republic built 25 of them under license from Sud-Est. And these things were flying around all over Long Island. I remember as a kid, I'd hear them and see them flying over my apartment house. Just an amazing little machine. This is shown at Hempstead Lake State Park in Long Island, which was just a mile or two from my house, and I could actually hear the Alouettes when they were doing the water checkouts on the lake, as you see here. So this is a model of the Alouette 2 that I bought in Paris on a trip that I was on in 1998. I stumbled into a little airplane store with a dear friend, and we just spent hours in there looking at all the cool stuff. But hanging on a rack was a plastic bag filled with white plastic parts and two clear halves for the cabin. And it was just a beautiful little model, but you had to build it, and there were no direction sheets. There were no decals. There was nothing on there except this little sign on the top of the bag saying it was an Alouette 2. So I bought it and took it home. And luckily, I had an original sales brochure from the Republic Alouette, plus a whole bunch of factory photos, nice close-up detail shots. And this allowed me to find the appropriate parts and put it all together to make the Alouette 2 that you see here, painted in the company demo color scheme. Rooftop landings. I wanted to talk a little about that for a second because the first rooftop landing by a helicopter in New York City was made in 1948 with a Bell 47D that you see here landing on the Port Authority building on 42nd Street. That's the Empire State Building in the background. And that was a big deal. It was in all the papers, and a helicopter had landed on a building. Well, in 1965, the machine that you see up there at the top right, a Boeing Vertol 107-2 twin turbine 25 passenger jet helicopter for New York Airways, began service from the Pan Am building, also on 42nd Street. And that was regularly scheduled service to all the New York airports, revolutionary development in helicopter transportation. And that's the spire of the Chrysler building that you see in the background of this shot, which was taken during a test landing. But the 107 became all the rage. It was used in a number of movies, and taking off from the Pan Am building was really a big deal. But here we see the copter on the ground at JFK. And let me show you a model of the Boeing Vertol 107. This is in Pan Am markings. It was operated by New York Airways, but they had two of these in Pan Am markings with the Pan Am meatball up on the tail. This is a model by Topping from Elyria, Ohio. Topping Models was the premier display model company in the 50s and 60s. Produced literally hundreds of thousands of models for all the manufacturers. And this gem was found at a model show from a dear friend, and is a beautiful example of a Topping model of the 107. Here's a factory model. These are models from a factory model shop. They're made out of wood, painted literally with the same paints that the real helicopters are painted with. This is the Lockheed AH-56 Cheyenne. It was referred to as the Army Advanced Aerial Fire Support System, which is a fancy way of saying gunship. But this was a rigid rotor design, first flew in 1967. It's called a composite helicopter because it has a tail rotor as well as a tail prop. It was fast, fully aerobatic, great machine, but very complicated at that time. And the Army decided to go with the simpler Huey Cobra, and then eventually the AH-64 Apache, which would be a direct descendant of this design. Another factory model from a company in Italy is the Hughes 300. Great little helicopter and a great little model. It's metal and plastic, and it's about I want to say 1/24 scale, operating prop and rotor blade, and it's just a beautiful example of what a factory model can do in terms of representing the real machine. And then we come to what are called diecast models, and this is an interesting part of the business because diecast model technology 15, 20 years ago was fairly primitive. And then today, as you see here with this beautiful Eurocopter AS-350B2 in the markings of the LA County Sheriff, they've really come up a notch in fidelity and detail. Really looks like the helicopter. And the beauty of diecast is it's very economical to produce. Once you have the master mold, you can put any markings on here, any law enforcement or fire agency or anything. And it's excellent for just a mass-produced on a large-scale type model that can be used for promotion. Here's another view of the diecast AS-350, and here's the real helicopter. And finally, I'm going to wrap up with a discussion of some box art on a classic helicopter kit, but this has some unusual things going on in this illustration. The artist was Dick Cusciati, Revell's first art director and box top artist. And this is the classic Prius Sikorsky S-55 helicopter. Show of hands if you ever built this kit and could not get those front doors closed around the engine. Yeah, me too. But let's take a look at the rotor hub. On European helicopters, the rotor blades, when viewed straight down, turn in a clockwise direction, and American helicopters turn in a counterclockwise direction. Well, let's take a look at that. Here you have the top blade rotating counterclockwise, the advancing blade on the left counterclockwise, and the retreating blade on the right is going in the opposite direction. How is that possible? And why? Well, here's the answer. To get the rotor blade inside the shadow of the hangar, Dick Casciati had to reverse the direction, and that's how it looks. These are the little devices, the little visual tricks that the artist would play on us 12-year-old unsuspecting model builders. We would walk into a hobby shop, look at something like this, and just say, I have to have it, put it under our arm, walk out the door, and mission accomplished. They had sold a model. Well, there you have it. A look at helicopter models. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you again for celebrating aviation with Mike Machat. Special thanks to some wonderful folks who helped make this video possible. We'll see you next time